You're listening to Beat Autoimmune and Thrive, the podcast all about reversing and preventing autoimmune conditions so you can live your most vibrant life as soon as possible. We talk about autoimmune root causes, actionable solutions, and inspirational healing stories. I'm Palmer Kippola, and I used to have MS. Today, I'm an author, a speaker, a functional medicine certified health coach, a pickleball player, and nature lover who's helped thousands of people reclaim their health and their best lives. Let's dive into this episode. I am delighted to be joined today by Dr. Anna Cabeca. She is a triple board certified physician who specializes in integrative medicine, sexual health, and bioidentical hormone therapy. She's affectionately known as the girlfriend doctor. She's the best-selling author of the Hormone Fix, Keto-Green 16, and MenuPause, and she's the creator of the highly acclaimed Magic Menopause program, which I have personally benefited from. Dr. Anna helps women balance hormones, boost energy, and reignite intimacy with humor, heart, and practical solutions. She's also developed natural products like MightyMaca Plus and Julva cream to support women through every stage of life. And today I'm delighted to welcome her to the podcast for a deep dive into the top hormone imbalances linked to autoimmune disorders and how we can bring them back into balance naturally, effectively, and for optimal health and well-being. Welcome, Anna.
Hey, it's good to be here with you. Thanks so much for having me.
I am so glad you are here. And, your personal and your professional credentials are so impressive, triple board certified. But what's even more compelling is your personal journey. You've experienced major life challenges and have gone through menopause twice. And those experiences, you not only transformed your own health, but your entire approach to medicine. And so I wonder if you would be willing to share your story with us and an abbreviated version and how those experiences shaped your shift from conventional OBGYN to a functional integrative hormone expert.
Yeah, it's a interesting story, and I know because of your audience, right? They've been battling maybe autoimmune disease or know someone who is. That there is so much trauma related to autoimmune disease, known or unknown, right? Sometimes it's unknown
Totally.
to us, known or unknown. But our body, like there's that great book, Body Keeps Score, and your book also I always recommend clients too. And so it's like important to think about as I share my story this trauma piece, and then I know that sometimes will open wounds in anyone who's listening. So I really wanna put a cushion around this and just say, we're here to share, I'm always, available, can follow up with the podcast to, Palmer, to myself, and anything that comes up because this is part of the healing journey. We have to
Yeah.
excavate. I'm a surgeon, like OBGYN, so did a lot of surgery, a lot of C-sections, not too many. I have to just qualify my rates for only 15%. Average now is 40%. But anyway, you know, uh, but when we have a wound, right, we have to excavate the wound. We have to heal from the inside out. And it's so true with our body. So as I share my story, I just wanted to put this, level of compassion, understanding, and awareness that, that things may come up for you too. So for me, my mom was, uh, w- older mom when she had me, but at age 52, she was 52, I was 16, and she was undergoing heart surgery. And I realized at that time that all the research they were basing her heart surgery on was done in men. I mean, all this research was before the HERS trial in women looking at cardiovascular disease and this stuff, but all of the research was done on men, and let alone not a postmenopausal or 52, maybe perimenopausal woman at that time. And so, and so really led me into research. I was a researcher first, and then into OBGYN women's health focus and research around this topic. But with all of that understanding and all of that knowledge, I had my own struggle. I was solo practice in Southeast Georgia, and I had to figure out how to industriously, for some of the poorest patients in our community, underserved area, and how to really help them ideally. But even with all that, I had my own journey. So I had lost my son in 2006 in a tragic accident, and he was only 18 months old and he was still breastfeeding.
Mm.
And that threw me into, you can imagine, unimaginable grief. Like, you just can't write about this, right? You can't speak it into that emotion and feeling. But also from that moment, any moms that have ever breastfed know if you miss a feeding by like an hour, like your breast engorged. My breasts went from like double D's at that time, normally B's, AB, I'm being generous, and to like empty socks, literally empty socks, never ever produced another drop of milk. And at like that was it. There was no weaning, there was nothing like that. And I had, breastfed two children before that. So my body went into complete shock.
Oh.
And then, after this, trauma like that, PTSD, and I didn't even really know that I had PTSD. I knew it was grief at that point. It later, under the surface, later became prolonged PTSD. And what happened was that my husband and I at the time, we wanted to really try to have another child. Not could never replace our son, our only son. However, we wanted, always wanted another child. And again, a lot of trauma around that. When you lose a child, when you have miscarriages, etc., it's very traumatic. I was diagnosed with infertility and failed 6 rounds of the highest injectable doses of fertility meds till my reproductive endocrinologist said, you're in menopause, this is early menopause, and, we could try egg donation, but the results don't look good. And anyone who's dealt with fertility clinics, someone at 39 years old, I was 39 at the time, they're like, "Hey, we're not gonna touch you unless you've got good chance," because that ruins their statistics and their presented based
Mm.
on their statistics. Anyway, but he was really committed to me. I was committed as an OBGYN. It helped so many women get pregnant. And this was devastation on devastation. So my body went from fertile, breastfeeding, to infertile and early menopause very, very quickly. And it was trauma on trauma. Really it was trauma on trauma, and I took a sabbatical from my practice and literally took a healing journey around the world where I learned with the grace of God in every step of my journey, I really learned about Eastern medicine. Even though I grew up, my mom's Palestinian American, she was born in Palestine, and so we used food as medicine as part of the culture and thousands of years of wisdom. So I grew up with food as medicine,
Mm.
but as I traveled around the world, I learned about indigenous herbs and roots because this was not part of my Emory University medical training. This was not part of that. And through that journey and the experiencing superfoods like that I've put together and formulas and things like that, but through this journey, not only did it reverse my early menopause, which is basically unheard of when you're given that diagnosis, especially at age 39, and naturally conceived my miracle child, my daughter Ava Marie, and naturally conceived her and at 41 years old. And so like this was like so this is so was so fascinating to me. And as I came back into my practice and this experienced all of this, I was literally on fire to help my patients do the same thing,
Mm.
to help, get to the underlying root causes. And I'm a proponent of this as first, not wait till everything else fails, but the underlying PTSD and that hormone imbalance really really helped me understand how important our hormones are and our hormone hierarchy is, but it takes more than hormones to fix our hormones. I'm living proof of that. So it takes more than hormones to fix our hormones. And so I've been really passionate. Now my daughter's 17 and I, almost 18 and I'm in Texas. I'm 59 years old and ride horses, haul horses, drive a big old truck. I'm doing all these things that, you know, my mom didn't get the opportunity to do
No.
because she passed away at, a young age due to cardiovascular disease. And so there's so much that we can do and so much I learned through my own journey to help my patients and really feel empowered. So
That is such a beautiful and hopeful and empowering story. It truly is, and as I'm reflecting on it, I'm also, really feeling in my bones that we all experience trauma. And this is you had a personal story and journey, but I'm feeling how universal this is, and some things we don't talk about very often. And so I'm so grateful for you for sharing this because you're living proof that we can go through devastating times and not only survive, out the other side, but you're thriving. And it's
I am.
it's
I literally am
r
living my best life and happiest, and internal joy is, is profound.
yeah. I feel like tears of joy coming up for you, for the world. I mean, this is unbelievably hopeful, and I really, really hope that everyone has taken this into their hearts because these are unimaginable tragedies. And I'm so glad that you were able to transform that experience and that your daughter's almost 18 is just a miracle. Amazing,
Yeah.
Anna. So
Yeah.
good. So, I'm gonna pick up on a word you mentioned, and that's hierarchy. Um, because in my work with autoimmune clients, I see personally, and I've written about 6 common hormone imbalances, but it wasn't until I met you and read your books and really began to understand the great importance of oxytocin. I would have added a 7th, hormone imbalance for low oxytocin, but I just wanna run through my list, and then I wanna walk through how your top hormone priorities map to this or differ, and, there's so much to this because every hormone affects the other hormone, and they're typically downstream from other lifestyle factors too. So we'll get into each, but I want to kind of frame the conversation with these top ones that we see and that you really help to get back into balance. So, in no particular order, high cortisol, high insulin, estrogen dominance, low thyroid, low vitamin D, and low DHEA, and we'll add the oxytocin, which is probably super low. Um, so that's my list. And can you talk about your hierarchy, what you think about, how you frame the hormone exploration with I'm gonna say mostly women who are challenged with autoimmune disorders, so that's the primary focus, but I don't wanna leave men out because I know they also suffer from these particular imbalances too, many of them.
Yes, absolutely. And so I like to explain my hormone hierarchy kind of in a visual too. Think of a university setting or, a school. And think of like I always look at a college setting or university setting and we look at all the students at the university. And every student is like a hormone. Each has their passion, their purpose, their gifting, their talents. And so, in this student body of hormones, you have your estrogen, progesterone, pregnenolone, DHEA, thyroid hormones, vitamin D, prohormone, right? And melatonin. These are all part of like this student body. Very, very important. Interact with others, right? You're interacting in classes, at parties, etc. Now you have your regulatory hormones, and these are adrenaline, insulin, and cortisol. And they're like the professors at the university. So you think of a professor that comes in, they're hungover or high, and they're like, they don't feel like teaching. They turn out the light and they, play a movie, and you're just like, there's chaos in the classroom. So, but on the contrary, I think some of my best professors, right? They're on you, they're interested, they're giving you feedback, they're constant, like they're great role models and leaders. Those are the we want our hormones in that tip-top shape, because when they're chaotic, when they're, like, left to run wild or depleted completely, not showing up, then, there's chaos in the student body. But overall, at every university or every school system, there's a principal, president, or dean of the university, and this is, like, I like to consider it the queen mother of all hormones, because again, like, this is the leadership hormone that sets the tone and the environment of the entire campus. And this is oxytocin, the most powerful hormone in our body. And, like, I got into medicine and in my trauma work, stress management, like, oh my gosh, stress management, got to do this, got to do that. And stress, just saying those words is a trigger for stress, in my opinion.
Mm.
Stress management is stress inducing. So I switched it to say, okay, we want to increase more oxytocin. We want oxyplay. I like to say oxyplay every day is the best thing you could do to keep the doctor away. So how we increase oxytocin. And I learned this not from textbooks. I created this hierarchy, not from textbooks, but from my personal and professional experience. And since I put it in textbooks as well as books. But this is the important part, because I recovered my fertility and naturally conceived a child, then that PTSD was under the surface. And what happens with PTSD physiologically and why it creates a lot of autoimmune issues is that with PTSD, with that trauma, you're consistently pushing that cortisol gas pedal. You're consistently pushing that cortisol. It really can go up and stay up, affecting blood sugar, affecting metabolism, affecting inflammation, all of this stuff that, cortisol is pushing up, but it's also frying out the nervous system. When cortisol is a very acidifying hormone, it creates an acidic urine pH. And how it does that is cortisol increases hydrogen ion secretion across the renal tubules of the kidney. And so you're pouring out this hydrogen ions. You're creating a very acidic urine. You're imbalancing cell membrane potential across the cell membrane. And that leads to breakdown, right? You're literally breaking down emotionally, physically, cellularly, creates leaky gut, leaky heart, leaky brain, all of these things from cortisol. So the paraventricular nucleus in these high cortisol states, this area in the a regulatory area in our brain, small, mighty, and powerful, puts the brakes on. I think it says something like, hey, cortisol, you are frying me out. I'm putting the brakes on you. It's not that you'll hear the terms adrenal fatigue, adrenal hypofunction is more likely or is a better word, or adrenal dysfunction. But it's not that the adrenals are giving out, like the adrenals fatigue. It's that you're suppressing that cortisol. So you get into this low cortisol state, and this is very problematic, because when cortisol and you're stressed, when you're in that state, when that's high, oxytocin is low. Think of two sides of a seesaw. So when cortisol's high, oxytocin, the hormone of connection, of social interaction, of trust, of a sense of safety, belonging, love, and intimacy, when that oxytocin is down, which makes sense, right, Palmer? Because when you're in that high stress, that trauma state, that is not the time to like hug your enemy and have all this compassion in the world, like
Mm.
physiologically. We need to shift that. And I definitely teach how to do that. But we have to shift that paradigm. But when you're in this low cortisol and low oxytocin state, that physiologically is the physiology of burnout, that physiology of divorce, of depression, of suicidal ideations. I mean, that's it, and that's everything that I experienced in the aftermath. And so it is, understanding that physiology really is critically important to fixing it. Physiology affects behavior, behavior affects physiology. So if that's the case, I'm going to use behaviors to improve my physiology in that state. So everything I can do to empower oxytocin now is going to help with cortisol. And as I work to reset circadian rhythm and cortisol curve throughout your day and month and et cetera, you want to improve that oxytocin. So that hormone of love and connection, that, it's a immune supporting hormone. It's a, natural regenerative hormone. And that's so important to improve that. And I figured this out because when I was going through the second, like I would say, a second menopause or full blown perimenopause with, one period every few months, mood swings, irritability, brain fog, loss of, I would say, mental capacity as well as social capacity. It was really isolating. Going into a store or a restaurant, seeing someone I'd known for years and being like, I hope they don't see me. I'm not here. I'm pretending I don't see them. And that, your world starts to get really small. You really start to isolate. And that is when cortisol is winning for sure. That is when cortisol is winning. And so those are that I realized that too, how it was affecting my body because during that time I experienced what my patients experienced in perimenopause, the weight gain without doing anything different. Right? Like my patients would come in and say, Dr. Anna, I've gained 10 15, 20 pounds without doing anything different. I'd be like, sure, you're not. Like, what's in your purse? What snacks are you eating? What's going on? And then, I would look, of course, do a diagnostic workup, but I didn't understand what was happening here with our physiology in perimenopause and all the other additional shifts of hormones. And so with that, straw that broke the camel's back, that weight gain without doing anything different, that was terrifying because I'd once been over 240 pounds, lost 80 of those pounds and kept them off for, a decade. And so I was really struggling with that weight gain because when was it going to stop at 300 pounds? I had no idea. And so I was like, okay, I'm going strict keto. I know that's good for the nervous system. I know it like our low carb plans that I put my candida patients on or my seizure patients on. I would do that. And always they lose weight. So I'm like, okay, cutting out all carbs. And I felt terrible. Was healthy, but still very imbalanced. And I checked my urine. I did something I tell my patients to do all the time. I said, I check my urine pH because we want an alkaline urine pH. And I realized that in this nutritional plan, this strict keto plan, my urine pH was very, very acidic. I mean, the pH paper, the lowest pH that my pH paper read was 5, and that was it. Like, it was, like, maybe less than 5. So, essentially, 7 is neutral, greater than 7 is alkaline, less than 7 is acidic. So, you know what acid does to a body, right? It starts to break it down. So, that was a huge aha moment for me. So that's where I like created what I call my Keto-Green method. I added in the greens, the alkalinizers, the low carbohydrate, dark leafy greens, parsley, arugula, beet greens, added in bone broth. And all this is 2014. So before all the electrolytes and, stuff like bone broth was essentially my mineral broth. Started incorporating these things, and my urine pH started to improve. I started to feel better. And because I was checking urine pH all throughout the day, I mean, it just takes penny. It could just cost penny. It's least expensive, one of the least expensive things you can do, biomarkers in your body. And I recognized that the mornings I did my prayer meditation or my gratitude journaling, or I walked on the beach, my urine pH was more alkaline all day. So it had nothing to do with it had something to do with what I was eating. But the real needle mover was the spiritual practice, the oxytocin increasing principles, which manage cortisol, but the oxytocin increasing practices that I incorporated, and my urine pH became more alkaline. So, where cortisol creates an acidic urine, oxytocin is the most alkalinizing hormone in our body and created more alkaline urine, which is so much better for the bladder. Anyone with urinary tract infections, incontinence issues, cystitis, etc., y'all definitely be checking your urine pH. But that is where I recognize the power of oxytocin. And as I increased oxytocin, I did more of these practices throughout the day, microdoses of gratitude throughout the day, focusing, shifting my mental focus to the positive throughout the day. That not only did I lose like 16 of the 20 pounds I gained quickly, but I felt better. My brain was clear. I'd gone from burnout, and again, I closed my practice again. And I went from burnout to, creating my Magic Menopause course, bringing that online. Because I'm like, if this is working for me, I'm going to help everyone with this because this is powerful information I wish I knew, a decade earlier. And so that's how I recognize how important, and since then, really have dug into oxytocin research, something I lecture on frequently too, include in my books and my courses, because it is, if we can shift and improve our oxytocin production naturally in this great pharmacy of our body, we are healthier and kinder to ourselves and to others. That's the hormone of compassion. And that's how, and that's made a huge difference in my life, especially considering the trauma I've gone through in my life. So, yeah,
So powerful, this queen mother at the top of the heap. And now that you're on this list of things we can do, one thing that I think about when I hear about oxytocin, I think of it as the connection between mother and baby and breastfeeding. And I think of, sexual connection. I really want to emphasize that you don't have to have another person to,
no
uh,
partner, no
no,
problem.
no partner, no problem. You could have a pet, and I've read studies where if you have a dog or cat, or I don't know what kind of animal you might have, but if they have eyes and you look into the eyes of your dog, I think the research might have been done on dogs, you will raise the oxytocin in yourself and in the dog, just staring into their eyes.
Beautiful.
Is that amazing?
It's amazing. It is amazing.
And we can hug ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
This is
Positive
not.
touch. We can watch
Yes.
My Big Fat Greek Wedding. I'm like, it's an oxytocin producing movie for sure.
Oh.
Like laughter, play, um, it's certainly positive touch, intimacy, hugging, kissing. Swinging on a like on a swing set increases oxytocin. Kids love to do that, right?
Oh,
And we stop at
wow.
some point. Do things that really bring you pleasure. Getting out in your garden. I have so many clients that are gardeners or pick up dance again. And and these are game changing. Playing with a pet, hanging out with girlfriends, and all these playing. Just what do you do that brings you pleasure and is playful?
And why did we ever stop?
Right.
Right? We put our toys away. We stopped dancing. Those connections are so meaningful, and it's not just because it makes you feel good temporarily, but I love how you did this multiple times a day, because I often talk about meditation or prayer or gratitude like bookends when you wake up in the morning and before you go to bed. But you've got a ton of hours between those 2 milestones, and this idea of measuring your urine pH, I've been doing it once a morning, but why just once a day, right? Especially if it's on the acidic side and you're doing things to increase the or alkalinize your body, you wanna measure it. Do you have favorite strips that you use? I know you have products, and I'll put all this stuff in the show notes, but I love simple practices that people can do, and this is fantastic what you've just shared.
Yeah, I created my own because initially I had like ketone urine test strips, pH paper, all that stuff. So I created my own test strips, keto pH test strips, and again, like very inexpensive. And I also added in ketones because as you get more into ketosis, that can create some urine acidity. So you really want to make sure you're optimizing your urine pH, adding in those electrolytes, the alkalinizers, the adaptogens, the grains from a nutritional standpoint too, and also so you can see what stress is doing to your body. And then I added in uric acid because in my plan, I really do want people to intermittent fast, get more into ketosis, periodically at least, and address those issues. But we can form more uric acid as a result of that. So you really want to pay attention to what's happening, especially if I've had clients on carnivore and, or not doing keto well or healthfully or fasting too much. It can really, depending on their genetics too, increase that uric acid, and that creates a weight stall. In high levels can create gout symptoms, but we know we want levels way below what the high range of normal is on a lab test. We want it less than 5 in women, less than 5.3 in men.
Fantastic. That's great information. I'm so glad you shared that. Let's talk. I want to make sure that you speak about cortisol as much as you like, because I know it's part of the seesaw. Do you do anything to identify cortisol dysregulation? Do you do any testing or interventions other than raising oxytocin for people that come in with high cortisol?
Yeah, yeah, I am very interested always in testing. What gets measured gets managed. But again, we have to take everything into context. That's why working with a good provider is so important. So I look at cortisol levels, certainly like in a quick blood panel. Usually we'll do an elite blood panel for my clients. I'll look at fasting cortisol, which doesn't tell me too much if it's high because you could have been very anxious on your way to get your blood draw. But it does tell me something if it's too low. But more importantly, I look at a urinary cortisol or salivary cortisol over the course of a day to see what your cortisol curve looks like. Now, cortisol is high in the morning because that's what wakes us up. So we should see that peak level in the morning and it should come down, throughout midday and after and be nice and lower in the evening, so that we get, we wind down, we get a good night's sleep. That cortisol curve can really help tell me a lot. And I look at that in so many clients, and I've looked at probably thousands of reports of urinary hormones. But what's important is, okay, this gives us a marker and it helps the client say, be really targeted in their approach and recognize, okay, no wonder, like, the first morning urine has a high cortisol level. That's reflecting what was happening overnight. And that's a good indicator that you're not getting good night's sleep. You're spiking cortisol throughout the night. It's cortisol that's waking you up at 3 a.m. And it can really help us figure that out. And then look at your second morning void as your morning cortisol, as like what's happened from the time you woke up or what woke you up essentially. So that's a really good way to look at it and help my clients. And if they're high in the evening with cortisol, they're not getting a good night's sleep. Okay, physiology affects behavior. It's not in your head, right? It's not necessarily in your habits, could be. But, these are things that can really help us refine our habits, refine our evening rituals, refine our supplementation to help support us throughout the day in a normal cortisol pattern.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, circadian rhythm is so crucial
Yeah.
and underrepresented in medical literature. In fact, Palmer, I was recently speaking at Harvard's Women's Health and Menopause, their inaugural event this spring, and we had an endocrinologist saying, "Oh, adrenal stress index that you know forget about." I'm like, "How do you not look at that?" I mean, if you look at it, target, manage that, your clients are so much better so quickly. And they realize, "Okay, it's not in my head, it's in my physiology, but now I can do these strategies, nutrition, supplement, lifestyle, oxyplay activities to improve my physiologic response."
I love that. I am so big on circadian rhythm. It really is the top of everything that I start out with clients, particularly women who are waking at 2 and 3 in the morning and maybe not getting back to sleep for a few hours. And boy, we talk about having a bedtime. It's not just for kids, you know,
Right.
and really developing habits that support you getting the best night's sleep you can. It
Yeah,
is critical and foundational. All right.
I
We don't
agree.
have a ton of time left, and I want you to talk about whatever you would like in the realm of hormones and autoimmunity because we've got a big list. We didn't get to high insulin or estrogen dominance or hypothyroid or DHEA. And I just want to welcome you to bring whatever you think is the priority that would be next on your hierarchy list that must
Yeah.
be addressed.
Yeah, we think of autoimmune disease and it's more in women, so we associate that with estrogen and really look at, again, how is our body utilizing, making, and or experiencing hormone disruption that's causing these symptoms of estrogen dominance. But what's really the case in most cases is this shift in progesterone and pregnenolone. Because if we think these, mother hormones from cholesterol, we make pregnenolone and progesterone, then downstream we'll make cortisol as well as DHEA down another pathway, DHEA being adrenal hormone and precursor to our testosterone and estrogen production. So, first, if you think of the way our hormones change over time, pregnenolone and progesterone decrease from age 35 to 55 by 75%, just from ovarian, natural aging. But add in stress, and you are further depleting, whether it's post traumatic stress, chronic everyday stress, perceived real stress in your life, physical stress, etc. We are pushing out that cortisol, and even when our brakes are on, that physiology is still in place, and progesterone and pregnenolone also get depleted. And this is important to really understand. We're pushing that cortisol um, pathway, and that depletes progesterone and pregnenolone even more. So the symptoms associated with low progesterone, estrogen dominance, like the irregular menstrual cycles, the infertility, the mood swings, the worsening PMS, the sensation that I love my partner, but only 1 or 2 weeks a month. And so I would say if that's the case, it may not be your partner, it may be your hormones. And or you're feeling bipolar, you have that brain fog, that anxiety and depression because our nervous system, our neurotransmitters are tied into our hormones. And so you start having these neurologic symptoms and we were trained and when patients come in with PMS, that put them on a cyclic and SSRI like Prozac or one of or Zoloft or one of those and or Effexor, like we're cycle them on these medications and if that's not working, you put them on birth control pills. And if that's not working, they're still having irregular cycles, you give them an endometrial ablation or do a hysterectomy. And if that's not working, you're like, well, I've done everything I can for you as a gynecologist. So here's a good psychiatrist I can refer you to and divorce attorney while you're at it, right? Like that's the like mod that that's the modern day approach. Like, let's just do let's put band-aids on, but you're never addressing like you have to do in trauma, the underlying core issues, the physiology that's affected by this trauma, by the body holding on to trauma, and wherever that shows up, really want to work through that to harmonize our bodies energetically, physically, emotionally, and mentally. So this becomes a really important these are important key concepts. And so with these hormone imbalance, when insulin's out of whack, we have certainly like when we become more insulin resistant naturally as we age. So the weight gain without doing anything different, the increase in Alzheimer's, the increase in cardiovascular disease, that's tied into that. But when we address through what I say is my Keto-Green method, and incorporating intermittent fasting and good nutrients. I compose these medicinal menus, I like to call them. Like I really look at phase 1 and phase 2 metabolism, look at the ways what ingredients we need, add in some fermented foods, really create these medicinal menus for hormone balance, that our body gets physiologically so much better. We become more insulin sensitive because when insulin's out of whack, testosterone's out of whack, estrogen, it affects our thyroid. And when vitamin D is low, and again, we get more than vitamin D from the sun. We get so many benefits, but that's why that circadian reset and getting in nature is critically important for our nervous system. But when our vitamin D is low, progesterone doesn't work as well. We become more insulin resistant. We have low oxytocin. We need elevated vitamin D levels for more oxytocin. And then I like to give a real world example, Palmer. So think of like southern countries, say, think Costa Rica in the south, or, Mexico even, or, compared to northern societies, like England or but we usually associate Southern Italy much more friendly than Northern Italy, for instance, example. So we we have to think, okay, there's vitamin D plays a part in that for sure. It plays a part in that. So we want to really optimize our vitamin D levels as much as possible too, because that's necessary for oxytocin receptors and oxytocin functioning. So that's critical. And of course, when cortisol is out of balance, then we're looking at all the inflammatory cascades. So we have inflammation in our body. We have that cell membrane breakdown. We have the urinary and bladder symptoms long term from that too. And so all of this can be interrelated with autoimmune. We want to look at it, again, we want to look at a comprehensive picture and follow up first with dietary, lifestyle, nutritional recommendations, and then adding hormones as indicated, cyclic progesterone with or without a uterus, or postmenopausally regular progesterone. I still like you to take three to 5 days off a month on progesterone because it is such a powerful mother hormone, and we do cycle it naturally in our body. That progesterone and pregnenolone, these hormones are really critical for sleep, for cognition, for our immune system, to help regulate Th2 immunity. And, so progesterone and pregnenolone, I combine them in my balance cream, which has progesterone, pregnenolone, and a great skin peptide, tripeptide in it. Because if you're going to put something on your skin, like you want it to reduce fine lines and wrinkles and age spots and all that good stuff too. So, but plus the natural hormone benefits of progesterone and pregnenolone, which are so critical and can really help support your immune system as well.
So I love that you have a balance cream that includes the pregnenolone and progesterone. I was listening to you and thinking I'll take two um, as you're speaking, because who doesn't need this or want this? And to put it on your face sounds fantastic. I'm wondering, do you test for pregnenolone or progesterone, or do you just assume as women age because they naturally decline that it's fine to take?
Yeah, I definitely feel very safe with it based on, again, understanding our body, our symptoms, and our labs as follow up is a great thing too. Um, when I'm prescribing can well assume again because of that decline for us from age 35 to 55 of 75% that we're losing some. Now we don't want to replace it to to age 20 levels of a luteal phase. I don't agree with that. I think again hormones affect our physiology, which affects our behavior. And so we want to keep it balanced. And menopause is a transformation time period, right? It is a transformation. It is like have a rewiring time period. That's part of menopause. And that can add to increased enlightenment, et cetera. But we live in a toxic world. We've done a lot of damage, like birth control pills, damage to our hormone receptor sites. And so we want to do like the piece of reviving. But I feel very safe with, again, if I wouldn't have produced it topically over the counter if I didn't believe so. And that very, very safe to add these amounts topically on us and can make a really big difference. You don't necessarily have to. Definitely if you've had your ovaries removed, yeah, you always want to. Definitely, and with or without a uterus because of the neurologic protective abilities of progesterone and pregnenolone, that makes a huge difference when you add it back. And what I heard my patients say is I started using it in my patients who were post-hysterectomy in early 2000s. I used it for sleep or for this kind I really wanted to work on all the hormones. They'd always come back in and say, "Dr. Ann, I feel like a cloud has lifted.
Mm,
I'm thinking better. The world went from shades of gray to bright multicolor, and I, feel more of myself and at home in my body." So it's a great natural antidepressant. It's great for our moods, and we prescribe it orally. Then it really has 90% metabolized into its derivatives of allopregnanolone, which also help with GABA receptors that help us get a good night's sleep. That's our body's natural anti-anxiety
I
hormone. So
love it.
progesterone orally really has a profound sedative effect in most clients. If it's not, if you're awake, that's because you're just feeding that cortisol bucket, and now you want to use progesterone in the morning instead. So there's fine tuning there, and I write about this a lot, but I think it sets that fine tuning, listening to you and your body, and and you're an N of one experiment. So, find that's very, very beneficial. And
This is
DHEA, we didn't really talk much about
I know,
DHEA,
I
but
know, and you know what?
yeah,
I'm feeling like I'm gonna need to have you back for part 2 because there's still a lot of hormones we didn't get to, and we're almost at the top of the hour, and I really wanna be respectful of your time. Um, this has been absolute wealth of information and practical strategies that people can use right away,
yeah,
like, starting now, you know?
yes.
Hug yourself, look your friend or your animal in the eye, be kind to yourself, test your urine. There's no reason that we can't do this. Are you acidic? Are there things that you can do to alkalinize yourself? I am quite sure there are. And these are such empowering experiments that people can do. You don't need a doctor to test your urine. Get your own urine strips and test it multiple times a day. See how you're doing. Practice these strategies. And I'm sure Dr. Anna and I would love to hear how you're doing with this. I mean, this is unbelievably empowering. Anna, it's just been an absolute pleasure and honor to have you here. And I'll give you the last word. Is there anything you'd like to end on? And please tell me you'll come back.
Oh, absolutely, of course. And again, like I um, am in practice in Dallas. I see clients a couple days a week, but mostly like the education created these programs online to make them affordable, wrote books to make them accessible, and in the products that I created because there was nothing in my doctor's bag. So I want to encourage you to always say, okay, you're never a hopeless cause. Right? You're never a hopeless cause. Your body is actually signaling that there's, one next right step. And it's one next right step after another. I'm constantly learning and evolving. And that's true for everyone listening.
Beautiful words to end on. Thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. Loved having you and look forward to the next time soon.
Me too. Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with your friends and family, and if you feel inspired, please leave a quick review so other people can find it too. Now, if you want to beat autoimmune and thrive, make sure you sign up for my free video training at freeautoimmunetraining.com. That's freeautoimmunetraining.com and watch the first video right away. Take good care. Bye for now.